The Veiled Tapestry, Book 1, Threads in the Dark. Chapter 2, Morning Light. The first rays of the morning sun filtered through the window blinds, painting the small, modest apartment in a warm, golden glow. As the specks of dust floated in the sunbeams, they gave a dreamlike quality to the room. The soft rustling of sheets and the gentle rhythm of their breathing filled the room as John and Hope lay entwined, their fingers interlaced in a sleepy embrace. The cozy scent of lavender from the fabric softener and the soft chirping of birds outside created an inviting atmosphere that promised a perfect start to the day. His messy hair fell over his forehead, and a slight smile graced his lips as he woke from his dreams. In the soft morning glow, John looked like any other young man. The apartment, furnished with an assortment of pieces from garage sales and thrift shops, reflected the familiar chaos of student life. Textbooks and notepads peeked from the shelves, evidence of John's forensic sciences studies. A whiteboard covered in scribbles and formulas leaned against one wall. Beside the bed, a cluttered desk held a computer with a now dark screen. Coffee mugs and a half-eaten burrito, remnants of late-night study sessions, sat abandoned and forgotten. A classic detective novel cover poster decorated one wall, subtly indicating John's love of mysteries and intrigue. John stirred, his eyelids fluttering open as he blinked away sleep. His gaze fell on the peacefully sleeping Hope, and he couldn't help but smile and kiss her shoulder. In a soft, loving tone, he whispered, "Good morning, beautiful." Still half asleep, Hope mumbled a response, her eyes fluttering open. She yawned softly and grinned, "Morning, baby." In that quiet moment, they exchanged gentle smiles, conveying their love and understanding in those simple words. As John got out of bed and went into the bathroom, the now more awake Hope sat up, a touch of nervousness in her voice. "Coffee?" John responded with an affirmative nod. "Coffee." Hope moved to the kitchen, the thought of the aroma of brewing coffee mingling with toasting bread in her mind. As she measured out the coffee grounds, the rich, earthy aroma filled her nostrils. The coffee maker gurgled to life, its gentle hissing promising a much-needed caffeine boost. John's voice called from the other room. "Don't make it too strong, babe." Hope smirked, shaking her head as she muttered under her breath. "You and your weak-ass coffee?" She chuckled to herself, amused by John's preference for a milder brew. Despite her playful jab, she couldn't help but smile at the familiarity of their morning routine. As the coffee maker gurgled to life, Hope reached for their favorite mugs. One chipped from a clumsy morning years ago, the other stained from countless caffeine-fueled conversations. These imperfections, she mused, were like the little quirks in their relationship that made it uniquely theirs. Pouring the coffee, Hope inhaled the rich aroma, letting it wash over her senses. She realized how much making breakfast together had become a grounding ritual in their lives, a moment of normalcy amidst the chaos of the world outside. It was a simple act, but one that held a profound significance, a reminder that, no matter what challenges they faced, they would always have these quiet moments to anchor them. Careful not to seem pushy, Hope cautiously ventured a question. "Hey, John," she began, pausing to see his reaction before continuing. "I was thinking about Thanksgiving. Have you made plans with your family yet?" Lingering at the bathroom sink, John let the cool water run over his hands before splashing his face. He caught his reflection in the mirror, his eyes meeting their gaze as he exhaled contemplatively. "Not yet, but I should probably call them soon. I know they'd love to meet you." At his words, Hope's eyes drifted down, finding solace in the kitchen tile's abstract patterns. "I'm a bit anxious about meeting them, you know? What if they don't like me?" Her voice held an unusual tone, unlike her normal composure. John's smile was warm and reassuring as he looked into Hope's eyes. "Trust me, they'll love you. Just be yourself, and they'll see what I see in you. A kind, thoughtful, amazing woman." Hope felt her worries start to fade under the glow of John's steadfast confidence. She returned his smile, comforted by his words. "Thanks, John. That really means a lot to me to hear you say that." "Of course, baby. We'll get through Thanksgiving, and you'll see, my family is going to completely adore you," John continued. Hope sighed, her eyes drifting to the table. "It's just, I've never had a real family Thanksgiving before. My parents are horrible people, and holidays were always a mess. I don't really know how to act around a big, happy family." John reached across the table, taking Hope's hand in his. Her skin was soft and warm against his palm, and he could feel the slight tremor in her fingers, betraying her nervousness. "Hey, it's okay. My family's not perfect, but they're loving and accepting. They'll welcome you with open arms, I promise." Hope smiled softly, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. "I want to make a good impression, John. I don't want them to think I'm not good enough for you." "Not good enough? Hope, you're amazing. You're kind, smart, and you make me happier than I've ever been. My family will see that too," John reassured her, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. Hope's smile grew a little brighter. "Thanks, John. I guess I'm just not used to the whole happy family thing. Growing up, Mom and Dad always fought, and sometimes it got violent. We never really had big family gatherings or anything like that. It was more eat your dinner and shut up kind of thing." John nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it, but you're part of my family now, Hope, and I want you to feel like you belong with us, because you do. You and I are the real deal." "I know, and I'm grateful for that. It's hard to shake off the feeling of being an outsider, you know? Like I don't quite fit in," Hope confessed, her voice quiet. "I understand, Hope, but I promise my family will make you feel at home. They're going to love you, quirks and all," John said, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Hell, Emily can't stop talking about wanting to meet you." Hope laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing a bit. "Quirks, huh? Like my obsession with true crime podcasts and my desire to try to be a famous YouTube home cook star, despite my inability to cook anything more complicated than toast?" John chuckled, shaking his head. "Exactly. They're part of what makes you, you, and I wouldn't have you any other way." Hope's smile was genuine now, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Thank you, John, for understanding and for making me feel like I belong." "Always," John said, lifting their joined hands and placing a gentle kiss on Hope's knuckles. "Now, let's finish breakfast and get ready for the day. I've got a feeling it's going to be a good one." Their conversation continued as John got ready in the bathroom, discussing their upcoming holiday plans and sharing their hopes and fears. In these moments, their dialogue deepened their connection, displaying their love and mutual support as they faced life's uncertainties together. As the morning light continued to fill the room, John and Hope's laughter and playful banter echoed within the walls. They were lost in their own world, wrapped in the comfort of each other's presence. But just as the morning seemed perfect, the phone on the kitchen counter suddenly rang, shattering the serenity. Hope went back to eating her cereal, the crunching of the grains loud in the sudden silence. She watched with concern as John reached for the phone, his forehead creased with annoyance. He glanced at the caller ID, and she noticed his hesitation. He had mentioned before how he disliked talking to his mother on the phone. She tended to ramble, prone to meandering tales, and he didn't look forward to being trapped for an hour just to communicate what could be said in 5 minutes. Hope wished she could spare him the irritation, but it was his mother after all. She gave him an empathetic smile, knowing that despite the inevitable frustration, a part of him still cared. Family was complicated that way. John took a breath to brace himself before answering, the morning sunlight glinting off the phone as he brought it to his ear. "Hi, Mom," he started, his voice betraying none of his inner reluctance. Hope turned her attention back to her cereal, letting the murmur of his voice fade into the background as she wondered what news his mother would have this time. "What's up?" John's voice managed to feign some enthusiasm. On the other end of the line, John's mother's voice crackled with grief. "John," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your Uncle James, he's gone." John felt his stomach drop, the cheeriness draining from his voice. His Uncle James had been like a second father growing up, always full of laughter and wisdom. They'd spent countless weekends together in his bookshop or fishing at the cabin, with James patiently teaching a young John how to cast a line just right. He'd helped John fix up his first car, hands stained with grease but grinning with pride at his nephew's budding mechanical skills. The thought that he was suddenly gone was like a punch to the gut. What happened?" John managed to ask, his voice now hushed and somber. His mother sobbed gently on the other end of the line. "There was a break-in at his shop. He was murdered." Her words trailed off into quiet cries. John felt tears stinging his own eyes as he tried to process the shocking news. His lively, vibrant Uncle James was gone, and not just gone, but violently killed. The pain of it was almost too much to bear, but he knew he had to be strong for his mother's sake. They would get through this deep loss together, just as James would have wanted. Time seemed to stand still as John's heart sank. He felt a sudden heaviness in his chest, and his grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Hope, seeing the change in his body language, moved closer to him on the couch, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What happened, Mom?" John's voice was barely a whisper now, choked with emotion. His mother's voice on the other end was now hushed and mournful as she explained the grim details. Uncle James had been found murdered in his antique shop in Savannah, the victim of a violent break-in. The circumstances around his death were still a mystery the police were actively investigating. John's world seemed to spin as he struggled to comprehend the devastating loss of his uncle, the man who had played such a significant role in his childhood. Uncle James had taught him about antiques and history, instilling in him a sense of curiosity and wonder. The pain of it was almost too much for John to bear. He felt tears stinging his own eyes as his mother's words trailed off into quiet, despairing cries on the phone. But John knew he had to be strong for his mother's sake. They would get through this deep loss together, just as Uncle James would have wanted. John took a shaky breath and tightened his arm around Hope. She met his eyes with a pained but reassuring look. Her presence gave him strength to face the difficult road ahead. As John held the phone to his ear, listening to his mother's trembling voice, a cold numbness spread through his chest. It was as if the room, once filled with the warmth of their shared life, had transformed into a stark, unyielding landscape. He found himself staring at a small crack in the wall, fixated on its jagged path, as though it mirrored the sudden fracture in his own world. The phone call ended abruptly. A heavy silence fell over the room. John's hand, trembling slightly, placed the phone back on the table with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the suddenly too quiet space. The air felt heavy, as if it had stilled in response to the devastating news. Each movement seemed deliberate, full of newfound meaning. The ticking of the clock in the background, previously unnoticed, now punctuated the stillness, marking the passage of time in a world irrevocably changed. The usually comfortable, chaotic apartment now felt suffocating, the walls echoing the weight of untold grief that filled the air. Tears welled up in John's eyes, and he buried his face in Hope's shoulder, seeking solace in her presence. Her touch was a soothing balm to his wounded heart, and he clung to her as if she were his lifeline. "It just feels unreal, you know," John finally said, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. His words carried more than just an expression of shock. They held the weight of unspoken fears and uncertainties. Hope whispered words of comfort and reassurance, her voice a gentle melody that eased his grief. "I'm here for you, John," she said softly, her eyes brimming with empathy. She reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his in a tender gesture of support. Though her own heart ached at his pain, Hope remained composed, channeling her care and devotion into each soothing syllable. "We'll get through this together," she promised, squeezing his hand gently. "No matter what comes next, I'll be here for you." Though the road ahead was uncertain, Hope's steadfast devotion kindled a faint glimmer of hope within John. Her gentle touch and loving promises eased his sorrow, if only for a moment. John clung to her, drawing strength from her compassion. As long as they had each other, he knew they would be all right. Their love would light the way and help them navigate the difficult days ahead, no matter how dark the path became. In Hope's arms, John found refuge.